Ernesto Barajas, leader of the Mexican regional music group Enigma Norteño, was shot and killed on the afternoon of Tuesday, August 19th, in a parking lot in the municipality of Zapopan, just on the outskirts of Guadalajara in the state of Jalisco. He was only 38 years old, a man in the prime of his career, and for many of his fans, the shock of his death has not only been a loss of a talented voice but also a piercing reminder of the constant risks faced by musicians in Mexico who live at the dangerous crossroads between art, entertainment, and organized crime. Local media first reported the news, and within hours it spread like wildfire across Mexico and into the United States, especially among communities that followed the world of narco-corridos closely. Confirmation of the tragedy arrived from his own team. His management and booking office, Tonto Lighter, issued a short but heartfelt statement that left many grieving fans in tears. They confirmed his passing to Billboard Español and also made their grief public through a simple message posted on Instagram stories. Rest in peace, Ernesto Barajas. Your Tonto Lighter family will always be proud of you and remember you as the great artist and human being you were. May God hold you in His holy love. It was a short message, but one that carried the weight of both shock and affection. For those who knew Barajas personally, and for those who only knew him through his songs and performances, that message felt like the final curtain on a story that ended far too soon. According to the first reports that emerged, 2 other people were injured during the attack that claimed Barajas's life. Mexican newspaper El Universal reported that Barajas had previously received direct threats from organized crime in 2023, making his killing all the more chilling. The Jalisco State Prosecutor's Office confirmed that an investigation had been launched into the events, but details remained scarce. Calls made by Billboard Español to both the prosecutor's office and the local police for further information went unanswered. In Mexico, that silence often speaks volumes. To many, Barajas's fate seemed tragically linked to the very subject matter that had made him famous. He rose to prominence alongside his band Enigma Norteño with an extensive repertoire of narco-corridos, a controversial musical style that tells stories, sometimes celebratory, sometimes tragic, of drug traffickers, cartel leaders, and the world of organized crime in Mexico. These songs, popular among huge audiences across the country and within Mexican-American communities in the United States, often put their singers in a complicated and dangerous spotlight. For Barajas, that spotlight burned especially bright. He gave special prominence in his lyrics to figures from the Sinaloa cartel, the powerful criminal organization based in the very state where he was born. For fans, this was what made his music feel raw, authentic, and fearless. For others, it marked him as a man living on borrowed time. The list of hits created under his voice and vision is long and memorable. Los Lujos LR, Comandos Angelito, El Rambo, Chavo Felix, Mato Gordo, El Flaquito, El Chicken Little, El 09, and Album JGL were only some of the titles that fans sang along to at concerts and blasted from their cars and homes. Each one carried a certain grit, a narrative that blended myth and reality, and each one reflected a world in which violence, power, wealth, and survival were tangled together. Enigma Norteño, under Barajas's leadership, became one of the defining groups of modern narco-corrido culture. But fame in this genre came with a dark shadow. In recent years, Barajas had received constant threats, both online and in person, and he knew that the songs that brought him admiration from thousands could also bring him into the crosshairs of people who considered his art a provocation. One of the most talked about threats was the appearance of a narcomanta, an ominous banner often used by cartels to deliver threats and warnings, that surfaced prior to one of his shows in Rosarito, Baja California in 2023. The message was allegedly from the CJNG, the Jalisco Nueva Generation Cartel, one of the most powerful and violent criminal groups in Mexico. The threat was serious enough that his performance was canceled, and while the public saw the official reason as safety concerns, many knew the deeper reality. These kinds of threats were not made lightly, and to ignore them could mean certain death. Further reports at the time revealed that one direct message to Barajas criticized his ties with Alfonso Alacuils and René La Rana Arzate Garcia, 2 alleged operators of the Sinaloa cartel. The message was signed by CJNG, making it clear that they were calling him out for his perceived loyalty and for glorifying their rivals in his songs. In a world where words, symbols, and music carry deadly consequences, even a lyric could become the trigger for violence. The nature of his career placed him at the heart of controversy. Enigma Norteño was one of the groups most affected by bans across several Mexican states against performing music that glorifies crime or violence. Local governments, attempting to control the influence of narco corridos, introduced these bans to curb the public celebrations of cartel life, fearing that such songs normalized violence or even encouraged young people to admire traffickers. For Barajas and his bandmates, these bans created a constant struggle between art and censorship. In May, during an interview with Telemundo, he spoke openly about the challenges. "In my opinion, a song, a corrido, has nothing to do with what is happening in Mexico," he said. About 5 or 6 years ago, there was also a wave of zero corridos. We once played in Chihuahua, which is one of the strictest states. I remember we made a list and played only songs, literally, and we had to do what other colleagues are doing, which is just playing the accordion and stuff, and they, the audience, were the ones singing. His words reflected both frustration and resilience. For him, music was storytelling, not an endorsement of crime. Yet he also understood the fine line he walked. Corridos had long been part of Mexican musical tradition, telling stories of heroes, tragedies, and struggles. The modern narco corrido was simply an evolution of that tradition, one that mirrored the reality of a country where cartels and violence are inescapable parts of life. But to governments and criminal rivals, these songs were more than art. They were weapons, allegiances, and provocations. Despite the challenges and dangers, Barajas continued to pour his energy into music and beyond. He was not only a singer but also a communicator. He hosted a podcast called Puntos de Vista, which became another way for him to connect with fans and fellow artists. The last episode was published on his YouTube channel on August 13th, just days before his death. Podcast featured prominent guests like Edwin Caz from Grupo Firme, Gabito Ballesteros, Roberto Tapia, and Jesus Ortiz Paz from Fuerza Regida. In these conversations, Barajas showed another side of himself, curious, reflective, and eager to explore perspectives beyond his own. It was a reminder that behind the larger-than-life persona of the corrido singer was a man who valued dialogue, friendship, and understanding. The news of his death struck fans like a thunderbolt, but for many it also carried a grim familiarity. Mexico has a long history of musicians, particularly those in the narco-corrido world, being targeted and killed. From Valentin Elizalde, who was murdered in 2006 after performing a song allegedly insulting to a rival cartel, to Sergio Gomez of Caipas de la Sierra, killed the same year, and countless others, the roll call of fallen musicians has grown long. Ernesto Barajas has now joined that tragic list, a victim not only of bullets but of the dangerous reality of a music scene caught in the crossfire of criminal empires.